What's going on, everyone? Mike here, and this is the Samsung Galaxy S5. It faces the difficult task of continuing its predecessor's winning run. Yet it was met with disappointment after its launch event in February, as many of us expected more from the new Galaxy. Regardless, we're going to have a detailed look at the device in the next couple of minutes, in order to answer the question of the moment. Is the S5 the right phone for you? The truth is, the S5 is not a groundbreaking evolution from the S4, but it tweaks and improves many of its aspects while adding a few new features to the mix. Let's take the design for instance. The S5 borrows its lines from the Note 3, with that rectangular shape, slightly rounded corners and a soft plastic back. Samsung chose this dimpled perforated pattern for the phone's rear, and that sparkles controversies. The coating feels alright, but I'm not entirely sold on how it looks. I mean, on this blue version that we have here, it's not bad, but on the other color versions, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you like this finishing? However, one thing is for sure. You will prefer this approach to hyperglazed plastic casing of the S4, especially if you plan on sporting this phone naked. On the other hand, if you're like me and put bumpers on your phones, you won't care that much about these aesthetic changes. Aspect aside though, the S5 feels nice in hand, grippy, although it has gained a few millimeters around its waist when compared to the S4. And that's not just because it includes a larger screen, but because it has a thicker bezel as well, with a slightly tinted ring and a more pronounced chrome rim around the glass. It has gained some weight as well. However, I can't say that the S5 feels stronger than the S4. It still creaks when squeezed firmly in hand and still lacks that premium, solid feel of some of its competitors. So if you're expecting this to change, well, tough luck, it hasn't. On the other hand, the Galaxy S5 is now IP67 certified, which translates in dust tight and water resistant. Again, water resistant, not waterproof, which means that it won't mind getting wet, but don't drop it into the pool. The certification says that the phone can take dips in water up to 1 meter deep for up to 30 minutes. But despite getting this water resistant certification, the S5 still packs a removable rear plate, which hides behind the battery and the microSIM and microSD card trays. The rubber gasket on the backplate's interior keeps the water from reaching these components, so it's imperative to properly put the phones back in place each time you take it apart, otherwise you lose the protection. And since we're here, I should also mention the microUSB 3.0 slot on the bottom lip of the S4, which is covered by a plastic cap, and the S5's rear-mounted speaker. The sound quality coming out of this phone is alright, loud and clear, although not very rich. The rear placement is not great either, but I can live with that. However, I did notice that pumping up the volume causes the phone's back to vibrate strongly, and that will get annoyingly when playing games or watching movies. Except for the microUSB 3.0 slot, the S5 keeps pretty much the same features and buttons along its edges, including the Air Blaster on top. The buttons feel strong and they are ergonomically placed where you'd expect them to be. On the back though, you will notice something new just below the main camera, and that's the heart rate sensor, but more about it a bit later. And since we are talking about new sensors, you should know that the S5 now features a fingerprint sensor integrated within, tada, the physical home button. We've seen that before, haven't we? However, on the S5 you need to swipe your finger vertically over the sensor, not place it on it, like with Apple's Touch ID. The phone can handle 3 different fingerprints and keeps them stored securely on the device itself. Right now, you can use your fingerprints to log into the phone, to access the private mode or make purchases via PayPal, but hopefully the app support will widen in the future. Scanner aside, the physical home button feels more rigid on the S5 and is noisier, clunkier as well. You'll get used to it in the end, but it will take some time coming from the S4. And since we are talking about the home button, you probably noticed that the S5 now features a back home multitasking control layout, the latter replacing the menu button seen on the previous Galaxy smartphones. That was expected, as all the other Android devices sport a similar approach. The screen still takes most of the front face's real estate. Samsung put a slightly larger 5.1-inch display on the S5 compared to the 5.0-incher on the S4, but stick with a 1920 by 1080 pixel AMOLED panel. That translates in stunning image quality, high contrast, deep blacks and wide viewing angles. However, it also translates into popping oversaturated colors. Some of you will appreciate that on your phone, some of you won't. However, the S5's panel is clearly brighter than the S4's, and that will translate in better bright light visibility, but also cleaner whites. So while on paper the two displays seem almost identical, in practice the S5 screen does improve some of its predecessor's shortcomings. Moving on and having a look at the area on top of the screen, we'll find the front-facing camera here, the light and air view sensors, the earpiece and the fairly bright notification LED. The earpiece is loud and fairly clear, so there's not a lot to complain about call quality on this device, despite it being IP certified. Anyway, enough with these details. Let's have a look at what you can actually do with this phone. Samsung updated the hardware and the software on the S5. They revamped the user interface as well in an effort to simplify and unclutter their dreaded TouchWiz. But while plenty of things have changed, TouchWiz still remains a hag. Yes, it looks flatter now, and yes, Samsung has ditched some of the useless features and bundled apps. But reminiscents of the old TouchWiz interface are still visible around the OS, in the dialer or in the messaging apps for instance. But let's have a look at what's new. For instance, the lock screen's design is somewhat different, and now integrates the fingerprint unlock mode. The multitasking panel is much more appealing, with each app's name being clearly emphasized on a blue background. The notification panel was redesigned, as well as the quick toggles on top, which have been flattened. And then the app drawer is closer to what we've seen with stock Android, ditching the separate widgets tab available on previous TouchWiz installs. The home screens have been slightly tweaked too. You can still customize them by pinching on the screen, but you can also do that by long pressing on the screen and on the multitasking button. From the launch menu, you can also change the wallpapers, add widgets, or mingle with the home screen settings. Speaking of this, you'll notice that swiping towards the left of the home screen will lead you to My Magazine, the flipboard-like news and social signals curator that we've seen on the Note 3 before. On that one though, you would call it by swiping from the bottom of the screen. Last but not least, Samsung revamped the settings, arranging them in a set of different tabs. The icons do remind me of the late Migo though, don't you think? On top of this, the S5 does bundle the other new features brought over by Kitkat, like Google Now integration, full album covers for the music player's lock screen interface, and so on. At the end of the day though, all these aspects don't radically change TouchWiz, they just revamp it. So if you liked TouchWiz before, you will like it now as well. If you didn't, you'll still pick a different launcher as soon as you buy this new Galaxy. For now though, let's turn our attention on the new software features bundle on this phone. Some apps have been redesigned, like MyFiles for instance, which quickly offers access to your important folders or the content on the SD card. Speaking of that, the S5 supports up to 128GB microSD cards and allows you to move apps on the cards as well. This adds to the 16 or 32GB internal storage space available. S Health has seen changes as well, in its effort to become a more completely activity tracker. It still counts your steps and calories, but now shows your heart rate as well, with the help of the heart rate sensor on the back of the phone. It also closely integrates with Samsung's new accessories, the Gear 2 Neo smartwatch and the Gear Fit Sports Band. The download booster is a cool new feature of the S5. It allows you to transfer large files using both the Wi-Fi and cellular networks at the same time, thus increasing the download speeds. So if you have an unlimited 4G plan, you might actually enjoy this addition. On top of these things mentioned before, Samsung added a few new modes on the S5. A private mode meant to fingerprint or password protect certain content on your device, a kids mode with a handful of parental control options, and last but not least an ultra power saving mode. This one turns the screen black and white, caps the performance, limits access to only a handful of vital services, but at the same time greatly increases your phone's battery life. With 80% of the battery's juice remaining, the S5 will last for over 2 days in this mode, and that's quite impressive. Long story short, the Galaxy S5 is a fast phone. It will breeze through your daily tasks, multimedia content, and even the most demanding games. But TouchWiz still needs work. As a design apart, it still stutters from time to time, even on this beefy configuration. Talking about the configuration, this version of the S5 runs on a Snapdragon 801 processor with 2GB of RAM. Frankly, I was expecting 3GB of memory, like the other top Android phones of the moment offer, but I doubt you really feel the difference in everyday use. Of course, there's no good in having a capable phone if it can't take you through the day and runs out of juice too fast. Samsung know that and have increased the battery size of the S5, which remains user replaceable and supports wireless charging with an appropriate backplate. In reality, I do see an improvement from the S4, but it's more or less a marginal one. With my daily use scenario, I unplug the S5 in the morning and it will go along till the evening of the second day. However, when pushed and especially when pumping up the screen's brightness towards max, you should only expect around 5 hours of screen time from the S5. With indoor use and the screen dimmed manually at around 20%, continuous browsing over Wi-Fi depleted around 11% of the battery in 1 hour, while playing FIFA 14 depleted around 9% in 30 minutes. Of course, there are things you can do to squeeze more juice out of this phone, and there are also some power saving and ultra power saving modes for emergency situations. Anyway, we can't conclude this review without talking about the camera, which has seen quite a lot of improvements from the Galaxy S4. On paper, it sports a larger sensor, more megapixels, a new focusing system that combines contrast and face detection, improved HDR shooting modes, and a dedicated companion chipset for image processing. In practice, this leads to a really fast camera, especially in good light. It focuses and takes a picture in under 1 second and the results are sharp and detailed. Samsung also revamped the camera interface and added a few shooting modes, like selective focus, but we'll talk more about those in a future clip. For now, I will tell you that the S5 takes great pictures in proper light, with accurate colors and plenty of details, although everything does seem more popping on a phone screen than in reality. It also shoots great video, with UHD and Full HD resolutions with clear audio and fair stabilization. However, low light performance is still not flawless, especially if you don't want to use the flash. In this case, it's crucial to turn on picture stabilization from the settings, but even so, you will end up with a fair share of shaky and blurry pictures. For anything else aside low light though, the S5 is a top-notch camera. But like I said, we'll talk more about its features in a separate clip. However, if you're interested in analyzing the images taken with the S5 yourself, I'll add them on my site and have a link for you in the description. Alright, all this being said, it's time to draw some conclusions. For sure, the S5 is a features-packed phone. In fact, it might have more features than many of you will actually use, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, the new Galaxy seems to have lost its wow factor. It looks rather boring and feels somewhat cheap by today's standards. It's gotten both bigger and heavier than before, and on top of those, the AMOLED screen, the rear-facing speaker, and last but not least, TouchWiz might actually steer some of you towards the competition. But the truth is, the S5 is still an amazing phone, for sure one of the best Android handsets of the moment. And Samsung sprinkles it with those nice gearline accessories. But this new flagship no longer sparks that wow, I need to have this phone feeling in me, especially these days when competing smartphones have got better and more diverse than ever before. I'm looking at the Sony Xperia Z2 here, the new HTC One, or the future to be LG G3, iPhone 6 or Nexus 6. And with that in mind, it's time to wrap this up. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking for your opinions on this phone in the comments section below. Let me know what you like about it, what you don't, and whether or not you're planning on buying it. And before you go, make sure to hit the thumbs up button if you like the video and share it around so others will find out what to expect about the Galaxy S5. Last but not least, subscribe to the channel for my future updates and my in-depth coverage of the most popular phones of the moment. Thanks again for sticking by till the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video.